16 people. That's how many bodies collapsed in one night inside the jade-trimmed chambers of the Tang imperial court, all choking, all retching, all dying beneath the golden beams of eternal rule. A banquet of peace transformed into a massacre. No blade drawn, no assassin caught, only silence and the stench of bitter almonds clinging to lacquered cups. Who could orchestrate such an elegant apocalypse? How does a concubine, dismissed as decoration, dismantle the might of emperors without raising her voice? This is not just a story of poison. It is the reshaping of the cosmos, drop by drop, breath by breath. And at the center stands Wu Zhao, later crowned Wu Zetian, the only woman to wear the dragon crown in her own name. But long before ascension, before coronation, she is a shadow fluttering behind silk screens, watching empires rot from within, and preparing her hand. Chang'an pulses with secrets. Inside its glittering walls, lies breed faster than heirs, and survival is a dance performed with bloodied feet. In the women's quarters of the Daming Palace, Wu Zhao is not yet a name etched in jade, but a 16-year-old girl wrapped in obedience and perfume, brought into Emperor Taizong's court as just another face behind a veil, another voice beneath incense smoke. Yet under soft lashes and folded hands, her mind sharpens like obsidian. She watches the concubines tear each other apart over whispers and glances, sees the eunuchs carry rumors faster than lanterns carry light. This is not the court of a divine sovereign. It is a nest of predators, and Wu quickly understands the truth no historian dares whisper. The throne does not rule the empire. The women behind its curtain do. And so, she learns to wait, not like prey, but like venom. Wu waits through years of silken silence. She tends to the emperor's horses, listens to his breath while he sleeps, studying each cough that rattles in his chest. When he slips toward death's edge in 649, Wu Zhao is sent to a Buddhist convent, her head shaved, her fate seemingly sealed. But from exile, she schemes. She does not sob or beg. She writes. Letters delivered by trembling hands reach a new presence behind the veil. Empress Wang, consort of Taizong's son, the new emperor, Gaozong. Wu once massaged Gaozong's shoulders as a girl. She remembers his weakness for her eyes, the tremble in his voice when he called her beautiful. Now, she promises Empress Wang an ally, a distraction, a woman who could pull the emperor's affections away from the increasingly arrogant consort Xiao. Wang, desperate to preserve her own crumbling influence, agrees. And so, Wu returns, not in disgrace, but in silk, not humbled, but with purpose. The girl from the convent steps back into the palace not as prey, but as plague. She is 24. She is patient, and the blood has only just begun to simmer. The return of Wu Zhao is a quiet tremor beneath the silks of daily court life, but soon it becomes an earthquake. Gaozong's eyes cling to her like drought to rain, and suddenly the imperial schedule shifts. Wang is sidelined. Consort Zhao becomes brittle with jealousy, and every glance Wu gives becomes a tactic. She does not seduce. She conquers. Her words are measured, her smiles laced with arsenic-sweet intent. When Gaozong takes her to bed once more, it is not passion, it is politics. Behind her lies the shadowed memory of a dead emperor, and ahead of her, the throne wavers under divided loyalties. Wu knows this palace is not merely decor. It is a battlefield dressed in silk. She begins placing her allies in orchestrated rows, eunuchs indebted to her kindness, monks who speak her name during prayers, and scribes who owe their status to her whispered endorsements. Each night, the chill in her chambers fades as Gaozong returns again and again, like a man walking willingly toward his own end. In the women's quarters, Wang and Zhao begin cannibalizing each other's influence, accusations multiplying like vermin. Meanwhile, Wu listens. She watches. And in the stillness before the storm, she begins to write names. Names of those who must fall before the dragon crown is within reach. The first name is Empress Wang. But Wu is not a blunt instrument. She understands the anatomy of scandal, how it bleeds through marble halls faster than any sword. A single tragedy will be enough, so she waits for fate to give her the tool. A daughter, born of Wu, dies in her crib. Suspicion swirls. Gaozong is devastated, but Wu does not crumble. She chooses silence, calm, composure. And when Empress Wang is seen near the crib the same day, when rumors slip from servant lips into the court's bloodstream, it is Wu who gently suggests nothing at all, only that grief is a strange beast, and those with no children might find it hard to understand. Wang is accused of murder. Xiao rushes to defend her, and in doing so, implicates herself. Wu plays no role publicly. She only weeps, ladylike, as Gaozong orders both women stripped of title, dragged by their hair through palace corridors, and imprisoned. Later, their hands are hacked off before they are thrown into the abyss beneath the execution tower. Wu never looks away. Her daughter is avenged. But it is not justice she wanted. It is vacuum. And now, at last, the path is open. The dragon crown begins to gleam in her periphery, not in prophecy or dreams, but in blood, in silence, in brilliance. But power, once grasped, must be gripped tighter with each breath, or it begins to bleed through the fingers. Now, Empress, Wu Zhao does not rest. She rebuilds the palace like a fortress, walls lined not with stone, but with surveillance. She orders secret police loyal only to her, their black boots silent, their eyes everywhere. Ministers whisper that the court is becoming a slaughterhouse of trust, but they whisper too late. Corruption trials begin at dawn and end in dusk decapitations. Old allies of the Li dynasty vanish from their estates, their families erased like ink from parchment. Still, Wu is not driven by cruelty. She is driven by vision, one threaded through centuries of exclusion, silence, and erasure. For every man pulled screaming from his carriage, 3 competent women rise in their place. She fills administrative posts with widows, scholars, orphans, those loyal not by blood, but by belief. Astronomers chart new omens. Poets write of a phoenix ascending. Yet still, at night, when even her guards have gone to shadow, Wu touches the silk curtains and speaks to ghosts. To the emperor she buried, to the daughter who died nameless, to the concubines whose laughter once rang louder than hers. She whispers to them all, "See what I made of your dismissal. See what burns where you left me buried." Beyond the curtains, rebellion fogs the horizon. The sons of the Li family, distant princes with imperial blood and sharpened ambitions, begin to circle like carrion. Whispers of rightful succession stoke fires across provinces. One prince, Li Wanjia, reportedly gathers officials in secret, citing Wu's unwomanly usurpation. Pilgrims on mountain paths speak of omens, of dragons slain by phoenixes, of a dying mandate. Wu does not wait for insurrection. She invites it. In a calculated stroke, she hosts a festival, feasting the entire royal clan under lanterns red with wine and omen. Plum wine poured by trembling servants, tart lotus cakes served with smiles. As the princes eat and toast again, their laughter begins to thin, their voices crack. Some stumble. One claws at his throat, another foams. In moments, 16 bodies collapse. No alarms, no assassins, just the taste of almonds and the soft rustle of Wu's silk sleeves as she rises from her seat, untouched, eyes cold as carved jade. The family that birthed emperors dies at her table, and Wu Zetian speaks only once. A house infested with rot must be burned to rise anew. But the purge is not the end. It is the beginning of uncontested reign. Wu Zetian, now unburdened by the weight of lineage rivals, declares the founding of a new dynasty, the Zhou, named not for her ancestors, but for an era she alone will define. The Tang has fallen not by invasion nor collapse, but by the unfathomable will of one woman once cast aside. She orders new coinage stamped with her image, temples erected in her honor, even a sacred text discovered in the wilds, a prophecy foretelling a woman as the next true son of heaven. And heaven, now silent beneath her ascent, offers no thunderous denial. She holds court beneath banners embroidered with dragons and phoenixes intertwined, justice dispensed with whispered judgments and sharp-eyed balance. Yet even in this triumph, a shadow lingers. In the inner sanctums of the palace, amid lacquered screens and perfumed corridors, Wu Zetian walks alone. The same corridors where once she awaited exile, the same eyes that feared her now bow, blind to the cost, blind to the bones beneath. And one cup remains untouched on her banquet table, its rim traced nightly by fingers that have taken empires. Poison, after all, is a memory, and memories, in this palace, never fade. Outside the walls of Chang'an, the world tilts to Wu Zetian's rhythm. Foreign ambassadors kneel deeper, their scrolls rewritten to honor her divine right. Former enemies now send gifts under false smiles, jade lions, ivory fans, shimmering silks, all tokens of uneasy reverence. Yet power never arrives without its final test. Her sons, grown in shadow, begin to reveal teeth. Some whisper against her in council meeting corners, others vanish suddenly or return broken from exile. One, Li Xian, once named heir, grows bold. He challenges her decrees, questions her visions. But Wu, always alert to the serpents within her nest, moves first. He is deposed, then dies mysteriously in confinement. Another son soon follows, his coffin sealed before rumors can bloom. Within the capital, loyalty is redefined not by words, but by survival. Through it all, Wu remains motionless atop her throne, an unmoving storm. She knows the shape of betrayal by feel now. She knows the taste of attempted matricide almost as well as she once knew exile. And still, she endures. Not because she is divine, but because no one else dared to imagine she could. But empires, like bodies, do not last by force alone. As Wu Zetian enters her final years, her breath slows, but her mind remains unsleeping. Aging ministers beg her to name a stable heir. Courtiers dare to glance beyond her throne, sensing mortality pressing close. Yet Wu hesitates. Every son reminds her too much of men she buried, and no name shines brighter than her own. Then, in the winter of 705, confined to chambers heavy with incense and paranoia, the storm breaks. Her most trusted ministers stage a quiet coup. Not blades, not battle, just a silk decree slid from hands once loyal. Wu, now bedridden, is removed from the throne by those who once knelt at her feet. She says nothing, not a scream, not a curse. As they formally restore the Tang name, she watches with pupils dark and bottomless. Days later, she dies in quiet. Her tomb bears no title, by her request, just two symbols etched alone, Jiao and Wu. No mention of empress, no claim to dynasty, only the echo of a woman who, once dismissed, transformed the fabric of empire. And amid the soil of Qianling Mausoleum, where she lies buried alongside the man she outlived and outshone, visitors pass her stone, wondering what it does not say. But history remembers. It always remembers the woman who poisoned her way out of erasure. So why does it matter, this tale of silk and poison, of fingertips that tipped empires? Because every empire since has tried to bury her twice, once in death, then in language. Wu Zetian is called tyrant, temptress, usurper, terms forged by fragile men writing from the shadows of her legacy. But strip away the myths, and what remains is not a villain nor a saint, but something far more dangerous. A woman who saw the machinery beneath the crown and learned to spin its gears in her favor. She turned the very tools of her subjugation into weapons of ascendancy. And her story survives, not because she burned so many to climb higher, but because even in ruin, in silence, in a nameless tomb, the world still struggles to reckon with what she achieved. After all, when a concubine poisons an entire royal family and builds an empire on the ashes, what else can you call it, if not the rewriting of fate itself? Perhaps that is the final irony, that the woman who hoarded power more ruthlessly than any emperor chose anonymity when it was hers to immortalize. That history's clearest echo comes from silence. In classrooms, her name flickers between condemnation and intrigue. In novels, she becomes myth. In whispers, she is invoked not for mercy, but for clarity, for the terrifying question her life dares to ask: what happens when the powerless cease to be grateful? The weight of Wu Zetian's legacy is not measured in monuments or scrolls, but in the cracks she left behind, within systems once thought eternal. She turned motherhood into monarchy, exile into empire, and a poisoned cup into a crown. And in every rustle of silk, every quiet gambit, she carved her name onto history's throat, not with permission, not with prayers, but with precision. And so we end where we began, in shadow, in silence, in breath withheld. 16 bodies fell, one woman rose, and the world, despite itself, still follows the path she bled into being. For every throne that rises, somewhere a girl is told to speak softer. For every dynasty hailed, a woman is told to wait, to serve, to endure. But Wu Zetian answered empire with empire. She left behind no heirs worthy of her fire, only successors trembling under the echo of her footsteps. She does not need adoration. She claimed something rarer: obedience, fear, awe. Even now, centuries later, beneath the surface of textbook footnotes and censored murals, her presence lingers, unsummoned but ineradicable. The halls of power across continents still mutter her name when women rise too boldly, climb too high, challenge too much. Not because Wu Zetian failed to fit her time, but because she shattered what time thought possible. She was never meant to live outside the margins, and yet she did, unapologetically, immovably, irrevocably. And long after her bones turned to dust, that poisoned cup remains, forged anew at every banquet of power, waiting, cold, full, and always within reach. Because in the end, Wu Zetian's rise is not a cautionary tale, it is a mirror held too tightly to the face of history, daring us to recognize not just what she became, but what others refused to be. Her poisoned banquet was not the beginning of tyranny. It was the price of a place at the table she was never meant to approach. And in those hushed moments, when scholars close their scrolls, when students pass over her name, when statues of emperors stand undisturbed while her legacy smolders beneath layers of omission, Wu still reigns. Not on a throne of jade or decree, but in the question that has no answer, whispered across millennia. If she had not been denied, would she have needed to destroy? The story closes not with justice, not with judgment, but with a silence cut sharp as a dagger and the knowledge that history was not ready for her. But she came anyway. She came anyway. And that is what terrifies them most. Not her ambition, not her deception, not even the deaths she orchestrated with a steady hand. What endures is the possibility she represents, that from the lowest rung of power, from the place designed to keep her quiet and compliant, she looked upward and climbed. Alone, with no prophecy to bless her or father to vouch for her. And though they erased her titles, edited her name, buried her deeds beneath centuries of scrutiny, the crack she left in the imperial mirror still glints. Every generation peers into it, wondering where their own limits lie. Because once, a concubine killed an entire royal family without drawing a blade. And when the world hesitated, she did not. That is not a warning. That is a legacy. And it breathes, still, in the shadow of every throne. And so, the woman history tried to silence becomes the echo that never fades. Not because Wu Zetian was flawless, but because she was undeniable. Her rise is not an exception to the rule. It is the thread that unravels the lie of inevitability. She did not climb by kindness, and no saint would have survived her crucible. She climbed because she saw the weakness in the world's architecture and learned to redraw its blueprints. History carved her out of stone, then tried to bury the statue, but it still stands, even when cloaked in shadow. And maybe that's the story's final poison, dripped slow over centuries. That Wu Zetian, empress of a rewritten empire, did not just build a dynasty. She proved the foundations of power were never as sacred as the men who held them claimed. They told her to wait. She did not. They told her to bow. She did not. And centuries later, somewhere behind silk curtains and sharpened smiles, another woman remembers that. Poison in her cup, fire in her breath, and a throne not yet claimed, waiting only for the one who dares to reach. In the silence that follows, one truth lingers like smoke above battlefield ash. Wu Zetian was not born to change the world. She forced it to change for her. From the convent's prayers to the palace's poisons, from her daughter's cradle to the dragon throne, every step carved into stone what no decree could erase. And though her dynasty ended, though her name was warped and her power feared, she did what no one else dared. She broke the pattern. She showed every silenced voice that history is not written by victors alone, but by those bold enough to seize the pen. Empress, tyrant, phoenix, shadow. Call her what you will, but whisper it carefully, because beneath every empire, beneath every gilded seal and painted scroll, her question still waits, sharp, clear, and deadly as the cup that ended a dynasty. Who decides what stories are worth remembering? Because the story of Wu Zetian does not end in stone or silence. It lives in the creak of every new door opened to power, in the unease of every old system forced to shift by a single defiant voice. Her shadow falls across time not as darkness, but as demand, as a reminder that no seat of control is immune to being overturned, and no throne eternally promised to the expected. She is not admired. She is not mourned. She is remembered because she cannot be ignored. And as long as there are stories told of rulers and rebels, of poison and pens, of women carved into cautionary fables, Wu Zetian will rise again, not in blood this time, but in memory, in challenge, in the frightening possibility that somewhere a silenced girl listens and learns and prepares her hand. So let them try to forget. Let them build their statues and rewrite their scrolls. Let them praise more palatable legends and smoother legacies. But Wu Zetian does not vanish. She waits in the margins where ambition is whispered and revolt begins as a flicker. Her throne may be dust, her empire folded into later dynasties, but her defiance remains carved in bone and breath. She is not the villain of history, nor its heroine. She is its unerasable question mark. She is what happens when the system fails to break you, when every no becomes a ladder, when every exile becomes a forge. And now, centuries past the poisoned banquet, her reflection lingers in every place power tries to close its doors, not to haunt, to remind. Because if you listen closely, beneath the silence, beyond the fear, you will still hear her. Climbing. She is still climbing. In textbooks and testimonies, protests and boardrooms, in whispers shared between women who do not wait for permission. Wu Zetian's legacy is not frozen in time. It is the door left slightly ajar, a scent of possibility in halls built to exclude. Across centuries, her name is spoken not with certainty, but with fire. Her story remains sharp, not because she was beyond reproach, but because she was beyond erasure. And in that truth, brutal, luminous, and unyielding, she offers no comfort, only clarity, that the machinery of power can be rewired, that the crown, so heavily guarded, does not always belong to those it was made for, and above all, that even the quietest footstep in the right direction can shake an empire to its core. Hers did, and someone's will again. That, more than poison. That, more than fire. That is revolution. So when we speak her name through clenched jaws or reverent breath, we are not just recounting a life. We are invoking a force that dared to look at the immovable and move it, that rewrote the rules mid-play, that turned exile into empire without asking. Wu Zetian is not a chapter in China's past. She is the page they tried to tear out, only to find it copied in every act of defiance since. Her legacy stains silence with defiance, robes with resolve, and history with the indelible ink of refusal. Because the world she left behind still teaches girls to wait, and somewhere among them, another woman sharpens her name like a blade. Ready, waiting. And with every poisoned banquet remembered, with every forbidden throne reclaimed, her story breathes again, not as legend, not as warning, but as blueprint. So remember the 16, but do not forget the 1. Her hands may lie still, her dynasty dissolved, but the contours she carved through history remain. In every system that falters under scrutiny, in every institution that shudders at a woman's rise, her fingerprints endure. What Wu Zetian built was not just an empire, it was a dangerous proof of concept, that brilliance can come dressed in silk, that ruthlessness can be righteous, that power, taken rather than given, can still reshape the heavens. And in the echo of her unblinking gaze, the world learns this lesson too late. Beware the woman told to wait. For when she finally moves, the empire moves with her. So beware the quiet ones, the discarded ones, the voices told to defer, to serve, to shrink. For history's most relentless revolutions do not always begin with armies or proclamations, but with a single breath withheld, a single glance sharpened to a point. Wu Zetian did not inherit her crown. She pried it from the bones of a crumbling order. She was not an accident of fate, nor a footnote of scandal, but the proof that silence breeds the sharpest architects of change. And as long as power fears those it seeks to contain, as long as history hesitates to name what it cannot control, Wu's story will endure, not as eulogy, not as myth, but as a crimson thread stitched through every moment when someone who was never meant to lead does. And in that act, the old world cracks open again. That is the legacy she leaves behind, not in monuments, but in motion. Wu Zetian, the woman who rose from a footnote to a force, remains not as a relic, but as a reminder that power does not bow to bloodlines and empires are not built by birthright alone. Her shadow is not cast to frighten, but to illuminate the truths we are taught to ignore. That the most dangerous voice is often the one told to stay silent. That the most transformative act is not conquest, but refusal. So when kingdoms strain to name her with scorn, let the record speak with fire, not for the poison she poured, but for the history she refused to swallow. Let them fear not what she took, but what she proved. That power, once seized by the forgotten, never forgets who once held the cup.